Welcome back, sixth graders. This is Ms. Hall here. I'm excited to have you back with us for another ARC lesson. Today we're going to focus our attention on citing evidence. I'm going to present to you some central idea for the same text we've looked at before as a guide, but keep in mind we're going to break this down just a little bit more. So let's take a look at our I can statement for today. I can cite textual evidence to support the central idea in informational text. And we're going to look at the selection focusing on orbiting space junk. For today's lesson, you will need a few things. As always, a hard copy or electronic version of today's article is preferred. If you don't have a hard copy of today's article, that's fine. We are going to chunk it together, but it is preferred that you do have a copy. Additionally, as always, have that handy pencil or pen. And because we're all fancy at this point, have that highlighter to help you with your annotations. And I highly recommend that you have your notebook with you. It allows us to stay organized and focused, and it just makes it easier to keep up with great information that we have. Now let's jump into our lesson for today. Now for today, we are going to divide our lesson into two sections. The first section, we're going to look at generic paragraphs to find the best supporting evidence in that selection. And then the second component, we're going to read our article and find the best supporting evidence for the already provided central ideas. So let's look at our first section of today's lesson. I have here a short paragraph, and your job is to list one reason that volcanoes are dangerous. So if you need to pause this video, go right ahead and do so and read this section for yourself. Now let's read together. Volcanoes are a dangerous force of nature. When a volcano erupts, magma from deep inside the Earth's crust travels to the opening of the volcano and comes out as hot lava. Volcanoes that are known to erupt are called active. There are active volcanoes throughout the world, including Indonesia, Russia, New Zealand, Italy, Iceland, Guatemala, and even the United States. So I'm going to highlight that one sentence that addresses our challenge here, which is list one reason that volcanoes are so dangerous. See if you're on the same page with me. Did you get the same thing? Great. I chose this sentence because it talks about how a volcano erupts and where it comes from. Is it important to know that there's volcanoes even in the United States? Absolutely. But we're looking to find out what makes volcanoes so dangerous. And it addresses that with the magma from deep inside the Earth's crust. How do we do so far? Let's try another one together. Now take a moment, make sure you have your notebook out because there are some notes I want you to add to your notebook right here. Here's some important things you need to know as it relates to citing great textual evidence. First thing first, always share where you found it. When we're citing evidence, we're not talking about our own personal opinions or making inferences. We're using explicitly what the author states in the text. Leads us to our second point. Use the author's exact words. No need to paraphrase it here. Last but not least, use quotation marks. Now this means a couple of things. When you're quoting the author, it's always great to use quotation marks because again, it's not your words, it's the author's words. Secondly, we want you to look for quotation marks as you're reading the text because that's strong evidence there as well. Let's keep moving. Now, when we're talking about citing evidence, keyword there, talking, here's some examples of what it sounds like in conversation and in writing. According to the text, you can fill in the blank there. On paragraph, the author stated. So again, you're giving the author credit for what he or she wrote in the text. The author wrote, fill in the blank there. And one example of this in the text is, and you fill in the blank there. These are what we call sentence starters. Kind of get us to go in the right direction so that it sounds like we're getting the information straight from the text and not from our head or as an opinion. How do we feel so far? This is an important note, so make sure you add it to your notebook. Let's try another generic example together. Here's a short excerpt. Your job for this one is name a reason the Pony Express delivered mail in the 1860s. Let's read together. Today, the United States Postal Service delivers mail by truck and by plane, but it was not always delivered that way. In the past, mail was carried by stagecoaches and steamships. It was also carried on horses. For example, the Pony Express carried mail across the country to the gold fields of Sacramento, California in the 1860s. Around this same time, trains started to carry mail, especially with the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad. So our task was to name a reason the Pony Express delivered mail in the 1860s. Do you see anything? So here's what I found. You notice here that I've highlighted two sentences. It lends us to understand that this was new and groundbreaking during this time, and it talks about the advancement of technology with the Transcontinental Railroad. Now we're ready for part 2 of today's lesson. Now keep in mind, you may have read the article already, and that's fine. You still want to reread it just so you can help us find some great supporting evidence for our central idea. Now here's my challenge for you as you read it this time around. Find some examples of space trash. When is it mentioned in the text? Add a star, highlight, or any type of notation as you're reading along. If you don't have a hard copy or electronic version, that's fine. Just play along with me as we look through our sections together. I have here a sentence, and I want you to determine, is this very important information to support our central idea of our text? Most of the earth is either covered in ocean or has plenty of open space. So chances are any hunks of junk will hit spots without humans there to get hurt. Do you think this is important information? There's some chance that this could be important, but for the most part, the article talks about the sizes and the amount of space junk. Let's jump right into our text here. Now keep in mind, when we're citing important evidence, it's ideal to stick within 1 to 2 sentences because not every sentence is important. So for this, remember our challenge was finding examples of space junk or when it's mentioned in the text. So you're going to notice me place a little star beside any reference to that. And then also, we're going to highlight together some supporting evidence that goes along with the central idea of each section of our text today. So let's jump in it. This is the first section, and it's titled our article, Wanted, Orbiting Garbage Collector to Clean Up Space. The night sky is full of stars, but it's also full of garbage. Humans put lots of satellites up there. About 1,700 working spacecraft are in orbit around our planet today. And not every piece of machinery comes right back when its job is done. Many keep speeding through the sky long after scientists have lost touch. Those leftover space machines are liable to crash into one another and break into small pieces. The National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or NASA, estimates that there are about 23,000 pieces of space debris larger than 10 centimeters, or about 4 inches. They also estimate that there are about 500,000 pieces of larger than 1 centimeter and about 100 million larger than 1 millimeter. Now, the central idea of this section we have established was humans have accumulated a lot of space junk. Here, I want you to find when is space junk or trash mentioned in this section. Do you see some examples where it's mentioned? I see it right here, so I'm gonna add my little star. where it talks about how it breaks into small pieces. And there's another piece where it talks about the space debris and also estimated 500,000. Now, I wanted us to try this activity together because if you see it multiple times throughout the text, it must tell us that it's important information. Hence why I used a little star notation. Now, let's find some evidence that supports the central idea of this section, that humans have accumulated a lot of space junk. Was there anything that stood out to you? Stick to around 1 to 2 sentences that best supports your central idea of the text. Here's the sentence that I think will best support our central idea. There's currently 1,700 working spacecraft out there already. And you notice that we mentioned that those leftover space machines are liable to crash and break into small pieces. So if you wanted to highlight that, I'm okay with that too. We already have a star beside it anyway, so that's the first mention of space junk. Was there anything else that stands out? Where it talks about the 23,000 and then the 100 million of the larger pieces and the 500,000. Because here it's talking about the different sizes of the space junk pieces or fragments. How do we feel so far? Let's try another example in our second section. This one is titled, Space Garbage Moves Fast. A piece of metal smaller than a sesame seed might not sound dangerous, yet even these tiny bits can pose a big risk. The International Space Station navigates around the paths of the most dangerous hunks of junk. But tiny flakes of paint have managed to chip the craft's quadruple thick windows. That's because space garbage moves fast. Because of the super high impact speed, more than 10 times the speed of a bullet, 250 miles up, even sub-millimeter debris can threaten astronauts when they conduct a spacewalk outside the International Space Station, says J.D. Harrington. He's a NASA public affairs officer. Small debris can punch a hole in a satellite. Meanwhile, larger debris can crush one entirely, creating even more wreckage. For this section, we agreed that the central idea was space debris, regardless of its size, can cause a lot of damage. So your job is to pause the video and find some evidence that supports our central idea of this section. So I'm going to stick with our challenge with finding some examples of where space junk is mentioned. So did you see anything where space junk is mentioned? So here's what I found. Space junk is what? Hunks of junk, right? Anything else? Mentions how garbage moves fast, small debris. Again, if you see the repetition, it tells you this is important for us to know. Now, let's find some evidence that supports our central idea. Space debris, regardless of its size, can cause a lot of damage. Here's what stood out for me. But tiny flakes of paint have managed to chip the craft's quadruple thick windows. This is one example of how smallest bit did some damage. What about in this section here? Now remember, when we took down our notes, I mentioned if you see any type of quotations, that might be some key piece of information that we can use for finding evidence to support our central idea. So if you highlighted the quotation that Mr. J.D. Harrington mentioned, that's a great option here. I would stick with these two, but if you wanted to use maybe the last sentence in our final paragraph, that's okay as well. But I like to stick with no more than 2 in this small section. You want to try another example? Great, me too. Now I'm going to read our central idea because I want you to think about some examples as we're reading the passage together. The central idea states, various agencies are still looking for possible solutions for the removal of the space debris. Find some evidence that supports that as we're reading along. This section is titled New Disposal Policy. NASA doesn't have plans to clean up what's there. However, the agency is working to keep the problem from worsening. They are ensuring that each new mission includes clear arrangements to dispose of spacecraft that no longer work and any pieces they eject. And there are potential solutions in the works from others. At the 2017 European Conference on Space Debris, presenters discussed ideas for disposing of space junk. Some scientists suggest pushing junk off into a higher orbit, while others vote for capturing it with nets and harpoons or magnets. In May, the International Space Station is expected to deploy a test project. It's called Remove Debris. It will capture several pieces of pretend garbage before burning itself up in Earth's atmosphere. So again, our central idea for this section was various agencies are still looking for possible solutions for the removal of space debris. Pause the video and highlight your evidence for yourself. Now let's take a look. Do you see anything that stands out in the first paragraph here? I think it's important to note that though they're not cleaning up what's already there, the rest of this section focuses on plans for removal of future space debris or space junk. So let's take a look at our second paragraph. What stands out there? Keep in mind, we're looking for something that supports. They're still looking for a possible solution for the removal of space debris. And I like the fact that they mentioned that there's even a conference on this topic here. At the 2017 European Conference on Space Debris, presenters discussed ideas for disposing space junk. Yes, it's important to know the varying opinions mentioned here, but I really wanted you to get the gist of identifying some primary sources of evidence that best supports the central idea of each section. I hope you're able to get some practice in finding supporting evidence for the provided central idea. Now, for some of you, it's easier to find the central idea first and then find the supporting evidence to go along with it. Or if you're like me, I like to find my supporting evidence to help me determine the central idea of the text. There's no right or wrong method to doing that as long as you're practicing those skills. Before we go, we still want you to keep reading for at least 30 minutes a day. Find a new book. Try a different genre. If you're not sure what to read right now, as always, touch base with your teacher or media specialist, or even a friend or family member. They may have some suggestions that you might like. As always, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Keep your notes, keep reading. See you next time.